General Grievous, the leader of the Separatist army, is definitely one of the most iconic villains in the Star Wars universe. Before becoming this cyborg monstrosity that could single-handedly take down Jedi, he used to be a Kaleesh warrior from the planet Kalee. On Kalee, he was a godlike warrior and had a legendary status among his people due to his insane tactical skills. Due to different circumstances, the Kaleesh warlord aligned himself with the Separatist movement, who were seeking a commander for their vast armies. However, Grievous was hard to control, and they wanted a soldier that was completely obedient to them. That's why they schemed for his shuttle to crash so he'd have to undergo extensive cybernetic surgery to save his life. They wanted to create their perfect commander, one with the skills and intellect of the Kaleesh warrior, yet also a being strong enough to fight the Jedi head-on if necessary. Grievous's organic eyes, brain, and spinal cord were extracted from his body and transferred into a Duranium ally warframe, inspired by the ancient Krath war droids. His remaining organs were sealed within a synth-skin gut sac, rendering him impervious to the vacuum of space. The modifications did not stop at his body. His brain was subjected to surgical alterations, severing a lot of his connection to his people and culture. His abilities were enhanced, his vision sharpened, his aggression heightened, and unbeknownst to him, a hidden kill switch was implanted under the control of Dooku, just in case he should go rogue. He was their perfect slave. However, his enhancements were definitely a huge upgrade and made sure he could go up against the Jedi. Thanks to his new cybernetic legs, Grievous didn't have to worry about fall damage or stamina issues anymore. While there were no flesh and bone components left in his legs, they were still modeled after his traditional Kaleesh biology in their form to help him get used to his new upgrades more easily. With the backwards joints changed in his legs, this gave him more of a raptor-like appearance, but it also helped with his insane leaping ability. While it wasn't as effective as force jump abilities in Jedi and Sith warriors, it did give him the upper hand against other foes, and could still rival the Jedi well enough. We can see him leaping for distances of as far as 10 meters, thanks to these enhancements, like on the trains in the Malevolence. As for dealing with issues of falling, the shock absorbers included in his leg joints kept this from being an issue, which ended up being very useful whenever he had to make a quick getaway while facing the Jedi Knights. At the very tip of his legs were clawed talons which helped in many different areas such as climbing, grabbing, and he could also use them for combat. Considering how many appendages Grievous had, the ability to fight with 6 limbs at one time was very useful. He could also simply hold on to ledges and platforms with one talon while keeping fighting with his arms and his other foot. Better yet, his feet were dangerous weapons of their own, and he used them against his enemies multiple times to squeeze and restrict them. His talons were strong enough to pierce durasteel plating. His use of his feet for combat is most notable during the Battle of Hypori, where he even uses his feet to grab an additional lightsaber while simply balancing himself on one foot and beating all the Jedi, including Ki-Adi-Mundi, with ease. It doesn't stop there, though. The upgrades allowed him to strike a traditional Kaleesh gait, thanks to the digitigrade stance, which perfectly mimics his species. Breaking down the durability of his leg armor, Grievous's thigh segment was fitted with stronger alloys to withstand stronger attacks, but his shin segment was fitted with lighter plating that would allow him to be more agile. His knees were reinforced with the Duranium alloy used for the rest of his body, as it was a vulnerable joint that needed to be protected from blaster fire. Moving up to Grievous's other limbs, his arms were also a rather impressive technical marvel. While his limbs might seem rather thin and spindly, they were strengthened with high tensile alloy plating that not only made them excellent for attacking enemies and moving obstacles, their cybernetic nature gave him extreme strength, which allowed him to lift up things as heavy as a starship. His wrists were armored with Duranium as well to protect him against blaster fire. The great enhancement was though that they could split in 2 to give him 2 arms instead of 1. This feature was supposed to catch the Jedi by surprise. Also, having Grievous wield 4 lightsabers should strike fear into the Jedi and allow him to overwhelm them that way. During Grievous's countless duels with Obi-Wan, he put his limbs on display by pulling out the extra pair of arms that function independently from the main 2. Even in the split mode, the joints were armored with plating that allowed the arms to split from 2 to 4 while keeping the main components covered. These armor plates were placed in the perfect spot so that he could take advantage of the multi-directional joints that allowed him to spin his arms 360 degrees. His spinning technique could reach speeds of up to 20 strikes per second. His cybernetic hands had 6 fingers, so when they split, he'd have 3 for each hand to grip onto things. In the Clone Wars cartoon, he's actually often seen with 4 fingers to split into 2 on each side, which was likely due to the animation budget though. Moving up to Grievous's torso, his chest plating was made of entirely the material duranium. While the high tensile alloy might have been strong enough for his arms and legs, his chest plate had to protect much more vital organs. Some of the few biological organs that Grievous still had that functioned were his heart and his lungs, which were located in an organ sac in his chest cavity. In order to make sure these were protected, the chest plate was made out of duranium, a very durable metal that could withstand blaster fire quite easily. It was even resistant to lightsaber slashes or passing strikes, but it wasn't strong enough to withstand a powerful stabbing blow. Since his lungs were still intact, he had vents on his chest that cycled air to his lungs, but any sort of damage to these respirator ports would mean extreme breathing issues until they were fixed. His chest cavity did contain an extremely weak spot that Obi-Wan exploited during their fight on Utapau. While the chest plate was excellent in defending against attacks, if someone was able to pry it open, rendering it completely useless against lightsabers or the blaster bolt, that ultimately ended his life. Grievous's respiratory unit was enhanced so that it also filtered out any toxins that might be used against him or environmental dangers, but his lungs were fitted so that they could withstand the pressures of space while not requiring oxygen for extended periods of time. We're able to witness this when he breaks the glass on the Invisible Hands command center and walks along the outside of the carrier to reach an emergency hatch to escape Obi-Wan and Anakin. Grievous's cloak might not be essential to his defense or strengthened abilities, but it was a key component of his character and appearance. His tattered cloak was damaged from all those battles since his time as a flesh-and-bone Kaleesh warrior, which was woven with resistant fibers that was impervious to fire, similar to how Darth Vader's cloak worked. Inside of the cloak were custom pockets that held his most treasured collection of lightsabers from fallen Jedi. The color of the cloak was symbolic of his honor cloths as a Kaleesh warrior, with the red and green lining all around it. While this cloth clearly wasn't used as any real armor, it did still provide limited blaster resistance. Grievous's inhuman strength and speed after taking the cybernetic upgrades was granted to him mainly due to the internal servo motors that were distributed throughout his armor. Even though Grievous still had his biological lungs, his energy was actually distributed throughout his body by energy cores. All of his limbs were run by small, shielded power generators, and there were so many of them added to his frame that he would easily be able to continue fighting even if he were extensively damaged during a battle. Even though Grievous was heavily armored with plating covering most of his limbs to keep them from being damaged, the plating was balanced in a way that made it a lot easier for him to be agile in even the most difficult situations. This was a key component in Grievous's fighting style, since he was trained in the lightsaber arts like a Jedi or Sith, but he wasn't Force-sensitive, and couldn't apply the Force abilities to master combat the same way. Since the armor wasn't completely invincible, this was necessary, as he couldn't simply tank the damage and had to play a more defensive strategy at times. Finally, we arrive at Grievous's head, and this is where his biological brain tissue was encased and protected. The brain was encased in a spinal column cradle made of cortosis weave alloy, and this construction was included as a way to protect from overload and lightsaber attacks, since Grievous's main opponent was always meant to be a Jedi. The head also housed another small biological component, as Grievous's eyes were clearly visible in the sockets. While this was one of the weak points of the head, his eyesight was enhanced by cybernetic vision enhancers, which were integrated right into the socket. With the enhancers, Grievous was able to see with HUD target tracking with an overlay that fed tactical data right to his processor. The headplate itself was another instance where the Frick alloy was used, as this was the only other area of his armor that held some of his living biological tissue. The structure and design of his faceplate was not only a reference to his Kaleesh heritage, but was also created this way as an intimidation technique to strike fear into the Jedi. As for the audio receptors, they were enhanced in a way that helped dampen all sonic frequencies, which was done to withstand a sonic attack. Another weak point of the headpiece was near the jawline where the respiration tubing was exposed, which would have been wide open to be severed at any time if anyone could get close enough to live and strike. And there we have it, the Kaleesh warrior's body explained. His armor and parts didn't die with him though, as his recovered parts were kept in Imperial storage until they were used to create the droid warrior NK Necrosis, which believed it was a reincarnation of Grievous. While Grievous never showed any force sensitivity or talents, his upgrades and armor made him a force to be reckoned with when facing Jedi Knights. Grievous stays true to his Kaleesh background with traditions and style of his armor, but all of his cybernetic upgrades make him more machine than man.